Well, why don't we start out with a few prayers?
Maybe we should say grace for all the people that are already eating.
Why don't we all stand up? Okay. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, amen. Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts which we are about to receive, of thy bounty through Christ our Lord. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
And glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
In the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Well, welcome back to the Warehouse of Love.
Be careful where you sit. There are strategically placed buckets around the room that are catching water.
It's raining.
Now you see, we make all the coffee, by the way, from that very water because it's been filtered through all those layers of roof material.
And asbestos.
Yeah,
Really, it's good and good for you.
yeah, it's the best. Yeah.
Oh, it's delicious. Rainwater. I tell you what,
See,
acid rain.
This isn't coffee. This is just what comes through the roof. We heat it up.
That's right. It's because acid rain. It's good for you. Keeps you awake.
And you know, normally this would be the week we'd be celebrating Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving. What about it? This is Halloween season. It's autumn.
No, Thanksgiving. No, this is November.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's November 21st.
Oh, but Halloween
You know?
is the big autumn festival.
No. Thanksgiving is the big autumn festival. Where have you been all your life? This is when
Wearing a mask.
This is when we get out the little cardboard hats with with the little buckles on them. You know, the kind of things that sort of look like 3 Mile Island replicas.
Like witches' hats, sort of.
Yeah.
A dunce hat?
Kind of
Well,
like a dunce hat.
Yeah, except dunce hats are pointed, and these are kind of like stubby. And we get to wear the funny little clothes with the the shoulder pads and carry around guns that have big wide trombone type mouths.
I don't do that. That sounds very odd.
I have seen you do it, haven't I?
I hope not.
Ah, well, maybe it was somebody that looked like you.
Well,
But,
how bizarre and
certainly when
peculiar.
I went to Catholic school, at this time, remember when you're in like 1st and 2nd grade?
Oh,
and
the
every
pageant!
month has a theme in your
Yes!
classroom, and everything gets covered with little cardboard cutouts.
Like
and all your
Halloween.
horrible crayon drawings.
Like Halloween, we
Yeah,
had to
but
do
Halloween's
pumpkins and.
already been torn down. That's in the trash
Oh.
bin, and now we're at Thanksgiving. It's all turkeys.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
sort of like the NBC Peacock, only it's a turkey.
All right, now I remember. I remember exactly. 1st grade, Sister Mary Esther, and we all had to draw pictures of, well, guys dressed in like these little hats with a sort of flat on the top, and they had buckles
The
on
3
them.
Mile Island replicas.
Yeah, that's right. Just that they
Yeah.
they looked like the, and there were these things that looked like the NBC turkey.
Right.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Well, oh,
The
Thanksgiving.
wonderful world
Of
of turkey. Yeah, that one.
Thanksgiving has come around again.
Yes.
I'm keyed in. I understand. Well, Thanksgiving is a wonderful time of year.
It certainly is. And we're supposed to bow our heads and give thanks.
We do
as
that
we
every
sit
night.
at the table with relatives that we can't stand.
Yeah, but the one magical night of the year at dinner, we can stand them.
Yeah, Thanksgiving. That's
Yeah.
what it's all about.
That's what it's all about.
It's a holy day.
It's wonderful.
Ask Father Feelgood, ask Father Oblivion. They've been talking about it for weeks from the pulpits about how this day is coming, which is the one day of the whole year when Christian charity reigns.
Who was saying Thanksgiving?
Well, it's not a saint. It's something that was established by somebody much higher than a pope, obviously.
Higher than a pope.
Yeah.
A turkey.
A turkey. Well, certainly higher than.
The
But never mind.
wonderful
The world of
of
turkey.
turkey.
Well, now let's think about this for a minute. So it was established by someone higher than a pope. Well, it's not a. Can non-Catholics celebrate it?
Well, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's one of those days where we put aside all our religious differences.
We do that at Mass. What's your point?
Yeah, but this is more of a political thing. I mean,
We do that at Mass.
It's an American thing, We put up the American flag.
We do that at Mass. I don't know where you're going with this.
I don't know anymore either.
Well, all right, let's get this straight now. You're telling me that we've got this big feast day coming up, the one that I remember celebrating in first grade.
Right, and look in any of the missalettes, there's a special mass for Thanksgiving.
What about the old missals? Does that have that?
No.
No. I see.
See, those were the old days when, church and state were,
Separate.
yeah.
What are they now?
Well, they're separate differently now.
Oh, well, all right, that cleared that up. So, all right, we're going to be celebrating this big celebration that'll be in the missalette, and it's not in the old missal. Well, there was some saints that were canonized, like you won't see St. Maximilian Kolbe in the old missal.
No,
No.
no.
Well, all right, so we've got this new saints who we're going to celebrate. Well, I admit, I'm playing dumb, and it's not hard to do. But I have a question.
It's those little brains we were talking about last time.
Little brain cells are dying. All right, well, now, Thanksgiving. This is a wonderful notion. Well, now, if it's not in the old missal, though, it's safe to say it's not a part of the old liturgy. And yet, we Catholics celebrate it fervently as anybody else in the country. But
We take the day off from work.
I better believe I will.
We travel miles and miles to be with those relatives we can't stand.
Oh, come on, I can stand some of your relatives.
I can't. Then you're a better man than I am. And the only reason we eat turkey, by the way, is because it has that chemical in it. What's the name of that chemical?
Testosterone. No, not testosterone.
No. That's New York steaks. This is I always
Peptid.
forget. No, but it's that stuff that like mellows you out.
Prozac.
No, it's the forerunner of Prozac. You know what I'm
Valium.
talking about,
Endorphins.
right? There's this chemical in turkey meat that makes you able to stand the relatives you normally can't stand.
I never knew that.
Yeah, there is. You know how everyone kind of like mellows out after eating turkey and kind of puts their feet up and burps and.
I thought that
No.
comes from having eaten far more than anyone should.
No. And you know another thing that makes Thanksgiving such a wonderfully Christian meal
What's that?
is that the average American consumes 6,000 calories at one sitting. And this is all, of course, in honor of poverty, chastity, and obedience.
So it sounds like dinner at the rectory every night. I don't know what your story is, but well, no.
I think we have them thoroughly confused. But
Well, Thanksgiving, as you're beginning to understand, we hope, is sort of the theme. But those funny people we were talking about with the hats, the Puritans, are really the chaps and chapettes who we commemorate with Thanksgiving. Now, in order to put tonight's talk sort of in context, I'd like to use this whiteboard to illustrate a simple notion, which will probably help us understand the holiday a little bit better. Sir, could you please read the words on the board? Nice and loud, please, for the sake of our studio audience.
He doesn't have his glasses. Puritan bad, Catholics good.
Ooh, Puritan bad, Catholic good. All right, now this may be sort of a hard concept to grasp. All right, what do we mean by this? Do we mean that all Catholics everywhere are nice people? No. Oh, yeah, he says, yes, I'm Catholic, and I'm good. Ergo, well, thank you very much. You wouldn't have flunked logic with that one. No. We're using them here as adjectives, not as nouns.
as in to be puritanic, Hal.
Or as to be Catholic. Now, in truth, Thanksgiving is a big, wonderful national holiday that we've all celebrated since we were kidlets. I know we did, in my family. There was, as I may reveal a little bit later, kind of a twist. Way we celebrated it, but we celebrated.
That's true of everything your family ever did.
Well, this is true too.
But
That-
the rest
I
of
like
us
my
all
relatives.
remember that it's, of course, now today turkey is very common, but back when I was a kid, turkey wasn't that readily available. So having a turkey meal was a big thing.
Oh yeah, and it was only for Thanksgiving and maybe Christmas.
Yeah.
Those were your turkey days, remember? And you did, if you went to Catholic school, you did have pageants, just like you were saying with
Yeah.
the,
And you decorated the classroom with turkey tails and
I didn't bring the Indian
and the
corn.
3 Mile Island hats and
I was going to bring the Indian corn, I forgot. I knew there was something.
oh yeah, oh well.
Next time,
maize.
we'll bring it for
The
Christmas.
rotten corn, yes. Okay. So anyway,
Well, but the, it's not rotten, it's just dried out.
It's all dry.
Anyway,
not very tasty.
I wouldn't recommend it, but the thing is, this is a huge part of our heritage, and not only is it semi-sacred, because again, you have the festive meal that you didn't have any other time of the year, except maybe Christmas, which is interesting in itself. It's uniquely American. Canada, in imitation of us, has their own Thanksgiving Day, which is, I think, in October sometime. But it's a recent thing. The whole notion of a national day of Thanksgiving is a very American concept. Why is this? Well, it's because in Catholic countries, you had tons and tons of holy days that were supposed to get that notion across. And in Protestant countries, in Europe, they had been Catholic. And so they kept a lot of those customs anyway. But here, it was a different story. Why? Because our first important English-speaking settlers, the people who set the die with which we've all been cast, were the Puritans. And these were the people with the funny hats who we celebrate at Thanksgiving as our forefathers, the Pilgrim Fathers. And you all know the names, I'm sure. First you've got the good ship Mayflower, which brought the Pilgrims to Plymouth Rock, which disgorged them on the shore. And then you had Miles Standish, who actually wasn't a pilgrim, by the way, John Alden, William Bradford, Priscilla Mullins, and everybody else like that. And they were wonderful people, and they loved the Indians very much. And the first Thanksgiving, they sat down with the Indians, and the Indians brought the food, and the Puritans ate it, and that was good. Well, and we've kept it ever since the commemoration. Well, we need to look to really get a feel for what Thanksgiving is about. We need to take a closer look, first and foremost, at the Puritans, at the Pilgrims. Now, they have two different words for these people. Pilgrims were the people that came to Plymouth, which is now in southern Massachusetts. The people that settled Boston and Salem were called Puritans proper. What they two had in common is that they were Calvinists. The difference between the two groups is that the Pilgrims thought the Church of England was too Catholic to ever be reformed, so they were going to leave it, hence they were Pilgrims. The Puritans, on the other hand, figured that it could be rescued. It could be safely purged of its Catholic elements, and so they were called Puritans because they wanted to purify it. Other than that, there was no difference between them, and in fact they soon merged after the Puritans realized that they weren't going to get very far with the Anglicans. Well, they were a dismal bunch. There's no other way to put it. I mean, there really isn't. In England, 20 years after the coming of the Pilgrims, they managed to overthrow the king in what was called the English Civil War. And they were led by a gentleman called Oliver Cromwell. And Oliver Cromwell was amazing because he liked death a lot. He was kind of the Dr. Kevorkian of his day. So he laid waste to huge portions of Ireland and Scotland. The people he didn't kill, well, there was the joke, some joke. He gave a lot of the Irish in the areas of Ireland he conquered outright, he gave them the choice to where they could go, to hell or Connaught. Connaught being the westernmost province of Ireland, which wasn't a very prosperous place in those days. So basically you could die now or starve. That was your choice. So Cromwell was a real nice guy. I will say that his opponents, the Cavaliers, had a lot of nice little things they would say to express their opposition to him. One of them was that they'd take a glass of whatever they were drinking, take a little bit of bread, dump it in, and say, "God, send this Cromwell down," and they drink it. Get it?
Yes. My introduction, I've mentioned this before, but it bears repeating and repeating. But
Could you repeat that?
yes, I will. The first time I came upon the effects of Oliver Cromwell was when I was a college student traveling through England.
Oh.
And it was my first experience of cathedrals, and not just cathedrals, but churches, chapels, just every place I went in southern England, I noticed that the statuary was all smashed. The faces in every nook and every cranny had been smashed. Some had been repaired, and of course not repaired very well, so you could tell they'd been smashed, and some had never been repaired. And I remember asking one of the caretakers or the vicars or something in one of the churches, "Why are all the statues smashed?" And he says, "Oh yes, well that was Oliver Cromwell's crusade against graven images. Now, this was centuries ago, and the damage is still there. So that was my first impression of Cromwell, an art critic.
He was a music critic too.
Yeah.
No, yes, Oliver Cromwell was a bit hypercritical.
Well, they were also cooking critics, because once over here,
Well, even before they came here, you see, the Puritans, when they got in charge in England, and so they did that before here. Interestingly enough, Massachusetts, the rest of New England, gave Oliver Cromwell a model to follow once they got control of England. You see, and the English say we've never done anything for them. One of the things they did was they outlawed Christmas in Massachusetts.
Whoa.
What?
In the United States,
Well, that was
in Massachusetts,
merry old Massachusetts.
the birthplace, the womb of this Christian country of ours, they
outlawed Christmas.
outlawed Christmas.
But then they noticed something. Not only did they outlaw Christmas, they noticed that people, even some good Puritan people, and particularly those Anglicans who'd come over with them, like Miles Standish, couldn't be trusted. They might be working during the day on Christmas, but then at night they'd go off on the sly and celebrate it. So they passed another law, which Oliver Cromwell then adopted when he took over England. They didn't just outlaw Christmas, they outlawed mince pies for fear that people would be celebrating Christmas on the sly.
And understand, I don't like mince pie.
Me neither. I hate it. Every Christmas I take a slice.
You gotta have a slice every Christmas just to.
This is for you, Ollie. I don't care for mince pie, it's true, but it's worth eating for Cromwell's sake. But these were the kind of people they were. They outlawed Easter. They outlawed all the church festivals. Oh, now don't anyone harm the cricket. Don't step on it. Don't touch it. Let it go.
He eats books,
No,
carpets.
crickets do neither. You know what they eat? They eat roach eggs.
Oh, do they?
And if you have crickets, you won't have
I don't have
roaches.
any roach eggs.
What's that?
I don't have any roach eggs, but I got a lot of books.
And you must have a lot of crickets. Leave the cricket alone. Oh, you'd rather have the cockroaches. Oh, man alive, you should have been in my apartment when I was a kid. All right. Anyway, sorry, I lapsed there. Oh, there we go. All right, let the cricket go. Oh, come on, pal. Come this way. You're good luck. Anyway, where were we? So, Easter. No, I'm not. Trust me. If you've got... the house I'm in now. We had roaches the first couple of years. Then we got crickets. They're all gone. They eat roach eggs. It's not a joke. Anyway. I'm sorry? Yeah. Oh. Anyway. All right, come on, kid.
You'll never catch him.
I'm not trying to catch him. I'm trying to move him aside. All right, now, thank you. Now that we've had our interruption for the animal kingdom, moving right along. The thing is, then, the Puritans were not terribly nice people. Now,
But they're the founders of our country. I mean, they were the first ones here.
well, no. I think you're going to read. There's a quote coming. I can hear it.
Quote coming. The event which today marks in the minds of most Americans the beginning of their history was the landing in 1620 of the so-called Pilgrim Fathers at a place they named Plymouth on the coast of what is now Massachusetts. However, nearly a century before then, this is reality check time, folks. Nearly a century before then, in 1528, a Spanish Franciscan priest, Father Juan Juarez, was designated Bishop of Florida. In fact, at that time, and far to the farther inland in what is today's New Mexico, Pedro de Peralta in 1609 founded a city which he named Royal City of the Holy Faith of St. Francis, which soon became known simply as Holy Faith or
Santa Fe.
Oh.
Peralta built on one side of the town's central plaza in the manner typical of Spanish capitals, the governor's palace, a long one-story edifice of adobe and long beams, serving well into this century as the residence of New Mexico's governors. It still stands. More important to the work of planting the faith within our shores, and once again typical of Spanish settlements, 11 churches or missions had been built in and around Santa Fe by 1617, and in 1625 there were 43 churches serving 34,000 Catholic Indians. Now these are little facts that kind of fall through the cracks with respect to the Pilgrims founding this country. They didn't found this country, they founded the ethos that took over this country.
Yeah, they are, how do I put it?
For one thing, they didn't bother building churches and baptizing the Indians so that they could worship together with them.
No. In fact, they had a very unpleasant relationship with the Indians, actually. But I would draw your attention to a book that's just come out. It's volume 1 of a series. The series is called, oddly enough, Puritan's Progress. And it is, in fact, a history of the United States in 5 volumes. This is the first volume. That's why it says volume 1. That's fine. This is the first. And the title of this volume is Europe Crosses the Water, 1492 to 1770. And the first 2 volumes, the first chapter is called The Founding of Catholic America, 1492 to 1763. And then the founding of Protestant America, 1607 to 1770. You see, Catholic America was in existence for a long time before the Pilgrims came.
And there was a major difference between the Catholic approach to dealing with Indians
And the
Protestant approach to dealing with Indians, because to the Catholic invaders, and make no mistake, there were wars fought, there was bloodshed, but nonetheless, Catholic invaders always came with priests, and they always came realizing that the Indians were souls to save. And so there were always priests and missionaries among them to teach the Indians and to baptize them and to make them become aware of the Catholic faith. And also, they always brought lots of single men. The Spaniards always brought boats of single men because they were descended from the Visigoths. And the Visigoths, traditionally, way back in European history, always conquered by infiltrating and intermarrying rather than just destroying. And so that was a Spanish trait, was to intermingle purposely with the population they were conquering. Now, I'll let you describe the Protestant approach to Indians.
only good Indian is a dead Indian. Is that simple?
You mean they didn't regard Indians as souls worth
Some
saving?
of them did. To be completely fair, there was a Puritan by the name of Eliot, not T.S., but an ancestor of his, actually, and George Eliot, his name was. And in the beginning, he attempted to convert those Indians that would go along with it, and they formed towns of what were called praying Indians. And Eliot sat down to write a translation of the Bible in the language. But you know something funny? By the time he finished it, there wasn't anyone left to read it. There were a few. And you'll find Indians in Massachusetts today, but they're all mixed blood. Not generally with whites, with blacks. One of the ways in which the Puritans hoped to break the back of the tribes when they discovered how much the Indians disliked the blacks because they'd been brought in as slaves. You know, the Indians had a lot of interesting superstitions about freedom and so forth. One of their policies was to forcibly interbreed Indian women with black slaves. It's something you don't hear a lot about. Because again, they felt that it would break the back of the tribes. It didn't, but it was done as a calculated insult. And this, of course, even the English in the South never came up with that one. That was a Puritan trick. They had a million of them. Smallpox blankets, that was another one. You know, you take you've got a smallpox hospital, you know, with your own people, and of course they catch the disease. Then you take the blankets and you give them to the Indians as gifts. You've got to do it fairly quickly, though, because
It stands to reason, though, since they were Calvinists, the Brits that were coming in were Calvinists, that their worldview was based on predestination as misdefined by Calvin, which is to say that none of us has any effect whatsoever on our salvation, that we're complete, it's already been decided who's going to heaven and hell. And so you could be, if you're among the elect, then you can do all the bad things in the world and you're still going to heaven. And if you are if you are destined for hell, it doesn't matter what kind of good works you do, you're going to hell anyway. So it's a religion of despair.
yeah, really.
If you really think about it.
And also they tended to identify themselves radically with the children of Israel in the Old Testament. So their stay in England, they likened to the oppression of Pharaoh. Their crossing over to the New World, they likened to Exodus. And the Indians and the French and the Spanish, they found when they got here, they likened to the Canaanites.
It's people destined for destruction.
No, and that was the end of that story. But an interesting thing occurred, and I mentioned to you earlier that at my house, life was a little bit different when it came to Thanksgiving. One of the things that my father used to do, he was a funny man, God rest him, but after dinner, we'd always have guests for Thanksgiving, and after dinner, after we were all stuffed there with our turkey and so on, Dad would take out a copy of Nathaniel Hawthorne's short stories, and he would read a story by Nathaniel Hawthorne called The Maypole of Merrymount. And that story begins, bright were the days at Merrymount, when the Maypole was the banner staff of that gay colony. They who reared it, should their banner be triumphant, were to pour sunshine over New England's rugged hills and scatter flower seeds throughout the soil. Jollity and gloom were contending for an empire. And that makes reference to a place in what's now Quincy, Massachusetts, south of Boston, which was called at the time Merrymount. It was not settled by Puritans. It was settled by rather more regular English, who had maypoles and celebrated Christmas and St. John's Eve and did all sorts of funny things like that, Easter, and who kept company with the Indians. Well, the Pilgrims didn't like that at all. They were kind of a blot on the landscape, as it were. So what they did was one day they attacked Merrymount and they imprisoned its people and shipped them back to England. And I've always wondered, having read that story, what would have happened if the Merrymounters had been a little more aggressive, you know, and had pulled the same thing on Plymouth? The history of the country would be very different. Boy, could you imagine a country where Christmas had been celebrated by even the English speakers from the very beginning? Anyway, that story shows the Pilgrim Fathers in a horrible light. And I could, every year it was the same, because Dad would do this on different people. He tried not to invite the same people every time so they wouldn't catch what was going on. The looks of horror on their faces as the story would continue, they were really wonderful.
The underlying point to this, to all of what we're saying here, is that we've been raised in this country, and in so many ways we've been handed a bill of goods, that we've been told that the Pilgrim Fathers were these wonderful people, and that they were good Christians and all this kind of thing, and that they established this day of Thanksgiving way back when. All right, well, the truth of the matter is that they were extremely anti-Catholic Calvinists.
Mm-hmm.
They did outlaw Christmas and mince pie in order to purge out any vestige of Catholicism that had come over on the boats with them, with the rats.
And they made up Thanksgiving as a substitute.
Exactly. Thanksgiving is the Puritan substitute for Christmas.
In the same way that the 4th of July, with its bonfires and its fireworks, was a replacement for St. John's Eve, Midsummer Night. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a strange thing to say. And you might say that in a way that today, in modern times, we've got the best of both worlds because we get to celebrate both, Christmas and Thanksgiving. But Thanksgiving is only a single symptom of the gifts the Puritans brought us. Because a funny thing happened with their descendants. Puritanism as a faith began to die within 40 years of their coming here. But the basic attitudes survived in an unconscious way to form some of the basic bedrock of our American character.
Another way of putting that might be no Calvinist descended Protestant would be. It doesn't take a whole lot of intelligent thinking to realize that's absurd.
That's always a problem.
All right. However, the underlying result, though, is a sense of despair in life.
A sense that of fatalism, really. And moreover, because in the wonderful days of predestination, it was taught that you could tell the elect because God would reward them in this life with material goods. Now, on a popular level, that came down to the wealthy are saved and the poor are damned. Now,
And the Indians.
the Indians, they're Canaanites. Don't even bring them up. Now, think a little bit further about this for a minute. If the poor are damned and the wealthy are saved, you, in order to demonstrate that you're one of the elect, want to work as hard as you can to become as wealthy as you can. And from this emerged the glorious Protestant Puritan work ethic. Work hard. Work not as a means to an end, but as a good in itself. Correspondingly, that which is good is that which brings money. If it doesn't bring money, it can't be very much good. Now, nobody would say that, right? Well, few people would, you know. Yeah. What I say is, if you can't buy it or sell it, it ain't worth talking about.
That's the rich old cantankerous grandparents of families sort of
No.
come
And
off that way.
you generally try not to listen to them if you can avoid it. But here's the thing. It is ingrained deeply into our character. Let me give you a few for instances. How many people do you know who, when they're out of a job, particularly if it's a thing where they had a sort of work that's no longer really needed, like, say, McDonnell Douglas aerospace people, and they get sidelined or made redundant, as they say in England, they just seem to go to pieces. Their whole sense of self-worth is gone.
I'd make it even more more down home to us. But what would any of us feel if we lose our job? We are so tied up in the idea that making money. When somebody asks you, who are you? The first thing we answer is what our job is, right? We're so connected with our work. That's the symptom.
Especially men.
Well, yeah, but don't worry, women are getting there. See, that's the beauty of women's liberation. They can be as silly as we are in this area, and that's wonderful. But see, and this, you go into things when you have mass layoffs. Inevitably, what do you have? You have a few suicides. Never fails. When a factory closes, and
or take it right down to the. It doesn't involve money per se, but students and studies. You
Yeah.
know, when I was a student at USC downtown, that was the year they put chain link fences around the Coliseum because too many students were climbing up the tower and throwing themselves off of it during exam week.
oh, if I don't pass the exams, I'll never get a good job. Now, there's more to this than pure privation. The vast majority of the world is poor, and yet the vast majority of the world doesn't commit suicide. The vast majority of the world will never be able to enjoy the standard of living we have, and yet they muddle through somehow. This is a terrible, terrible illness that is endemic to our society. And it is a direct gift, a special present from the dear Pilgrim Fathers whose memory we're going to celebrate next Thursday. But there's more. There's more.
When will those guys ever just give up?
Never.
There's always more.
You betcha. The second point is, how do we look at the poor? Now, let me say something parenthetically here. You'll always get Father Oblivion and Monsignor Dweeb up in the pulpit saying, oh, we've got to worry about the poor. Well, their notion of looking at the poor is as a substitution for religion. No, 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 no. Christ himself has given us two very, very important things to bear in mind. One is, the poor you will always have with you. The other is, alms giving covers a multitude of sins. Now, we made reference to this before, it may even have been the last time, but it bears repeating. In our society, the poor are not simply objects of pity and assistance. They are objects of scorn. That's not Catholic. You know, if you go to England and other parts of what was once Catholic Europe, but I use England because it's got an English phrase for it, you will see places called almshouses. Now, these are to a degree, but certainly were in Catholic days. In Catholic days, they were generally run by monasteries, or by different great lords. And then afterwards, they had other arrangements after the Reformation. But before the Reformation, an almshouse was where the poor went to get alms. And this was considered to be the duty of those who had the ability to do it. Many of the wills that wealthy people had in those days, in all across Catholic Europe, would say things like, leaving a sum for the support of 12 poor old men to pray for my soul. Does anyone here remember a poem called The Eve of St. Agnes by the poet Keats? A few of you, a couple of you. Well, it starts out, you know, it was the eve of St. Agnes, ah, bitter chill it was. The owl for all his feathers was a cold. And then it goes on to talk about how the beadsman is in the chapel late at night, saying his rosary, and it's so cold that his breath is coming out like incense. That's the simile that is used. Well, that beadsman was a very common fellow in medieval Europe. He was someone, a poor man, who was paid to pray. That's what he did. And similarly, throughout medieval Catholic Europe, and to this day in parts of it, they had all sorts of notions like, you know, the blessing of a beggar, and the blessing of a blind man, carrying a little bit of grace with it. One of the rather jocular, I mean, beggary became a real big trade in the Middle Ages. One of the jocular things they have in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, the novel, is about the court of miracles where the blind see and the lame walk. But see, because what happens is these people hang out at the court of miracles, and then they go back to their usual stad. Oh, I can't walk. Oh, I can't see. Then they get the day's earnings. They go back to the court of miracles and spend it in the tavern. Well, the thing was, the medieval man didn't care really what the beggar did with his money. What he cared about was giving alms to cover a multitude of his sins. So that all went out with our Puritan fathers. No, no, no. If you were poor, you were damned, and you deserved it. And this is why the Puritan work ethic was so important, because you didn't want to become a part of that crowd. You didn't want to be one of the great unwashed, who were all damned anyway. So that's the second thing, our attitude to the poor. There's a third gift the Puritans gave us, our attitude to the arts, and to literature, and to music. You might say, our aesthetic sense. You know,
Hey, the World Trade Center, compare that to Notre Dame,
yeah, you do that.
Paris, and you can see what cultural progress is all about.
That's right. We're wonderful and we know it, but the problem that we have, again, is that if it doesn't bring in money straight away, it's no good. So, we're not really all that interested in learning that doesn't have an obvious practical use. Why do you think the humanities, which really give an individual some handle on the way life really is, teach him to somehow think, to somehow put the world around him together, why do you think the humanities in our country are consistently slighted whenever it comes to funding? For business courses. Why do you think it is that the arts of this country are inevitably looked at purely in terms of what will bring in money? I mean,
every university that has a school of music or a school of art considers the school of music to be the money pit. You know, because a school of music does not bring in money like a law school.
or a business school,
Yeah,
or a football team.
or an architectural school or whatever. Now, most universities will have a school of music because they don't want to be considered totally sterile, but they don't support them.
And this, of course, he has personal experience of.
Yes.
But lest you think this be special pleading, I can tell you of a certainty that in Catholic Europe, once again, all of these things that we consider minor, art, music, and the very fact that one feels the need to justify them, shows you what our real mindset is. Look at look at those cathedrals that you saw in Europe, if you've seen the chapels and all that, the palaces and everything else. Even the peasants' homes, which some of them were just incredible works of art. It was considered that for something to be useful, it had also to be beautiful. Even the tools that they made, regular tables and chairs, they went out of their way to make them both useful and beautiful at the same time, because they had the Catholic sense that the beautiful is all bound up with the true, which is all bound up with the good, and you cannot separate the three. What the Puritan believed was that if it was beautiful, it couldn't be true. And if it was good, well, it couldn't be beautiful. They were tough love. That's what Puritanism was about. Now, lest you think this is all being made up, I invite you to compare the buildings of, say, our own Spanish Southwest from colonial times, whether it be an adobe ranch house or a mission, with the French houses and churches in Quebec and Louisiana. They're very different, these two groups of things, from each other. Very, very different. And yet, you can see the same spirit in them. They're different in so many ways. And yet, in both cases, you see that the people who lived them, the craftsmen who were individually assigned to work on these things, did their best to make them strong and useful and beautiful. Then turn your eyes to New England, to the bare, white meeting house. It could pass for a morgue, except that morgues are generally more restful. Think of that. There's a reason why they hated Christmas and why they hated Easter. It was because they hated, in the end, the very creativity that those feast days called forth. Gifts from God. No carols. These people hated Christmas carols. They hated music of all kind. Do you know the one sort of music that was on the books anyway? I'm sure they couldn't have kept up this law. I'm sure. Psalms. And not the arrangement of the Psalms that had been used in England up until that time. No, the music for those Psalms was derived from Catholic chant. So out it went. And they made up their own kind, which was very, very dull. Because if it's pretty, it can't be godly. It would get your attention off God if you sang something pretty. They were wonderful people.
That's one of the real tragedies. I've heard accusations that the reason Catholics built these cathedrals the way they did was to make people feel small when they walked in. I've gotten this from my own students, you know, and it's like, no. I mean, yes, you might feel small walking into a big place. That happens, yes.
Feel that way in the Empire State Building.
Yeah. But everything in a cathedral goes up. All the arches go up. All the colonnades go up. And as a result, what does your heart do?
Ascends to heaven.
It ascends. And it's like you can't go in there without this sense of uplift. And well, I mean, I suppose you could fight it, but the
No, I want to be here on the ground. You can't make me.
but if you go
I'm a
into
toad.
any of these New Englandish kind of churches that have the little wooden steeple, no cross, and just this, and you go in, and it's like, it sort of reminds me of my closet when I was a child. You know, it was hardwood floor, bare walls, bare light bulb, you know, and it was like, that's it.
They want to distract you from worshiping.
Of course, this doesn't apply anymore, but you may recall there was a time when you went into a Catholic church, it was quiet. And not just quiet, it was tranquil. And if you were like, if someone was in there saying a rosary or kneeling in front of one of the statues, and you got a coughing spell, you didn't then say, "Oh, excuse me, excuse me for interrupting your prayer. Are you having a nice day?" No, the thing you would do is clamp your hand over your mouth and try to shut up, and if you couldn't, you'd leave, you know, until you could, you know, get over it. In other words, it was so important to maintain the sense of awe in the presence of God in a Catholic church. But of course, if you went into any Protestant church, it was like going into a high school auditorium before a basketball game.
It wasn't that solemn.
But there was no
Go Indians.
There was no sense of awe. There was a sense of
Community.
community. Yeah. Now, of course, that's all changed because
Well-
in Catholic churches today, you go in, they sound like auditoriums.
Oh, don't say that. St. Rita's up in Sierra Madre is a monument to. It's a monument to. Yes. Well, anyway,
Yes.
what were you saying?
All right, but yeah, and also we may have touched on this in another talk, but art itself, paintings. You know, you go into old Catholic churches, even in this area, like St. Elizabeth's up in Altadena. The walls are covered with these beautiful paintings.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
St. Andrews in Pasadena.
Oh gosh, yes. And it's like the Stations of the Cross are done in great detail, and you can just see that when people made these things, they put a lot of themselves into it, and they were wrapping up a gift to God in the midst of all of this. And of course, when you go to the cathedrals of Europe, and you realize it took generations to build these buildings. That is a man who started working on some column, maybe his grandson finished it, you know, and this whole sense of as you say, beauty and goodness and truth all mixed in together.
You know what astonishes me really about those churches and so on in Europe? The wealthy, as the wealthy always can, were able to enjoy beauty in their own homes and in their own private chapels. The European peasant saw it in his parish church. And it was beauty the like of which we go over to gawk at here. The average equivalent of an American peasant cannot ever come to that sort of beauty unless he goes to a museum, and then he has to have it explained to him. And the likelihood is he's not going to be going to a museum anytime soon. Most of them don't go to church at all. Those who do go to ugly things, and they never associate religion with beauty because, again, as good Puritans, we don't. What I'm trying to get across here is think of the radically different sensibility that gives an individual. For one, though he might be a peasant, you know, can't read, nevertheless, day after day, very often every day of the year, he comes face to face with things that even our best minds consider absolutely outstandingly beautiful. And he can read them in a way that we can't. Because you see, you know, when you and I go there, we just see a bunch of pictures and statues. And, you know, unless we've got the guidebook put out by the local cathedral, we have no idea what we're seeing. But they did. They would sit there and they would look at all the stories of the Old and New Testaments and stories of the saints and the doctrines of their religion, and all that came alive in stone or plaster or canvas or wood for them. Contrariwise, with us, as good Puritans, whatever we learn, we get out of a book, or now on TV or the internet, because we can't read anymore. So we've got one step further. And we're used simply to ugliness. We live in a world that is hideously ugly. Look around you. I mean, the warehouse of love, we've tried a lot to do, but this represents, this is a warehouse of love we're sitting in. Really, despite what we've tried to do with it, it epitomizes the Puritan ideal. It's just a warehouse. What else do you expect? Well, you go again to Europe, and you look at some of the earliest remaining factories. Not the later ones, because then they got up to speed. Look at some of the earlier ones, the earlier warehouses, especially the ones, the pre-industrial ones. They tried to make them look good, not just outside, but for the workers inside. But look at this crass, hideous, ugly thing. And most people spend their working lives like this, in places like this. Then they trot home to their ratty little apartments. And if they've got some really deep sense of gorgeousness, they've got a picture clipped out of the Reader's Digest of a, or a Christmas card from 3 years ago showing a congregational church in the snow. That is how they feed their spirit.
Now, wait a minute. They can always get out their shotgun and go to the park and
They
go
can-
for a walk.
That's it. They could do that. Yes, they could go to the park. Oh, it's wonderful. And beauty surrounds them. Turn on the television. There's nothing but beauty there. Boy, oh boy, you can have smut or violence, and all of it at a level a 3-year-old 50 years ago would have found beneath him. That's where we're living. And Thursday next, we are going to be able to celebrate the people who ensured we'd be that way. And I'm proud of it. Let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. The thinking of it right now, I just want to go out and stuff a turkey. I'm just so proud I could burst.
I think a few people would like to stuff themselves with that cake over there.
Oh, all you can think of is food. You can't think of the higher
Whenever I
life.
get upset, that's all I think about. is
Well, all right, gang, it's break time. We'll reconvene in 15 minutes. Kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Glory be to the Father, to the Son, and to the Holy Ghost.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Saint Nicholas,
Pray for us.
and the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen.
Amen.
Well, hi, gang. How y'all doing?
Fine, Charles.
That's good. Will you come
You
here?
look cold. You look like you're shivering.
Yeah.
These are supposed to be fireside chats, and we don't have a fireplace.
Don't you worry about it.
Well, Ray brought an electric fireplace once, but it would sort of
Vanish.
Yeah.
In the immortal words of St. James in the Epistle, be thou warmed, be thou fed. See, it works. Well, all right, let's see. What are we talking about?
We're talking about Advent.
Advent. What's Advent?
Well, Advent is the time before Christmas when we all put up our Christmas lights and we
Go to office parties.
go to office parties, put up Christmas trees, decorate our houses,
Day after Thanksgiving. for
buy
us.
buy scented candles, start filling up our closets with Christmas presents,
We get
drinking eggnog,
heavily spiked.
sneaking a couple of morsels out of that See's candy box that we were going to give to somebody, but decided we'd just sort of keep for ourselves. And
We eat it. We give our closest relatives the books we want to read. Now, that's what my brother always used to do for me. He'd give me books he liked. Yeah, well, that's Advent. That's great. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And when does it all come to an end?
Christmas Day,
I see. And what do we do with the Christmas tree on the next day?
trash it.
Good. With the cast-off paper and everything.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's nice. Well, it sounds like wonderful.
Yeah,
stuff.
well, you kind of just, crack the tree in two, stuff it up a chimney, and light it.
We used to do that.
Might get a flue fire, but,
You know what was really great would be letting the tree die and then burning it in your backyard 2 days after Christmas.
Yeah, that's fun, too.
See the pine needles go. Yeah, Advent. Merry Christmas, everyone. We're back in Southern California Christmas. And that's how it is. What is, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend anyone. Happy holidays, everyone. Season's greetings.
Well,
What are you all laughing at?
let me put it down.
Don't laugh. This is the way Christmas is. This is the way Advent is for literally millions of people around the country. It's great stuff. It, oh, you know what we forgot? We forgot all about the specials on TV.
Oh, yeah, we get to see 3 different versions of the Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
We get to see How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Rudolph, yeah, and
Frosty the Snowman.
Frosty the Snow, and the Charlie Brown Christmas.
Charlie Brown. I like that one.
Incidentally, all these things can now be purchased at Tower and Warehouse and stuff at reduced prices too. So, personally, I prefer the George C. Scott version of A Christmas Carol.
Oh, I like the real old one.
You would.
Not Alistair Sim, but you know that nice 1930s one? That was good.
I like the one Lon Chaney Sr. was in, the Phantom of the Christmas Carol.
That was good too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to see that. I remember sometime or other. It's very inspiring, isn't it? It's great stuff. Yes. Well, but what about Santa Claus? Let's not forget Santa Claus.
Oh, well, Santa Claus, he's on every street corner ringing a bell,
Sounds
collecting money. I don't know where all the money goes that all the Santas collect.
good. Goes somewhere. Goes out of your pocket. Well, that's great. That's Christmas, gang. Isn't it wonderful? Now let me ask you all a couple of questions, just out of curiosity. Have we been painting kind of a bleak picture?
Yes.
No, it's been a happy picture.
Sure it is. See, look. It's very, very happy. And the great thing about it is you can tell it's a good time because whenever you say something about Christmas very often to coworkers or whatever, they go, oh yeah. Of course, it's a wonderful, happy, jolly time. It reminds me, it's the happiest time of year. And in a way, I'm reminded of something that happened to my friend Axel and myself when we were waiting in line to get in at Disneyland. And he was from Germany. He's from Germany, you see, and he had never been to Disneyland before, so he had to see our great shrine. We're standing in line, and there was this family ahead of us from New Jersey, apparently, both from their accent and from what they were talking about. And finally, the mother says to this little girl who's sort of recalcitrant, "This is the happiest place on earth, and everybody's happy here except you." Bam! And I don't know, I was kind of inspired by that. That was good. I like that. And so somehow the notion of the happiest time of year kind of makes me think of the happiest place on earth, Disneyland.
Well, there was a time in my life, not the proudest time, but there was a time in my life when I worked for the Postal Service.
Really?
And this was the time of year when they started all the music they pumped in from the ceiling became that drippy, that bum 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 bum, and it's
you
like,
don't like the little drummer boy. That's the only religious special we ever saw
well,
before Christmas.
the problem was that by the time Christmas came and we'd been shifting around so many packages and parcels that were Christmas presents, obviously, that when Christmas finally came, everyone was dead from exhaustion, hated Christmas carols, just absolutely hated the thought of Christmas, and started talking like Scrooge and not realizing it. You say Merry Christmas, and they would, stick a branch of holly through your heart.
Bury you in your own plum pudding.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty much what Christmas has become, and it's become a terrible period of fatigue and so forth. But we should remember about Christmas first and foremost that it is the second most sacred holiday in the church year.
What do you mean by sacred?
I meant solemn. I misspoke. It's the second most solemn,
What do you mean by solemn?
reserved to the worship and adoration of God. That's what I meant.
Oh, that.
Oh, that. Jesus is the reason for the season, as a mug I was given once said. Well, I mean, it's crude and annoying. It's one of those things like wise men still seek him. They annoy you and they make you want to break the cup on the one hand, but they do tell the truth. It's not like they were lying, which is more than could be said about a lot that's talked about Christmas. It's like those signs you'll see, put the Christ back into Christmas. You see them often enough, and again, you want to throw a rock, except that it's true. That's one little problem. My mother, one of her great crusades was against Xmas, which, see, before we had Happy Holidays and Season's Greetings, those of you who are old enough to remember may recall that Merry Xmas was a big thing. Remember Merry Xmas?
Mm-hmm.
And my mother's line was, put the X back into Xmas. And
Well, there was kind of the mistaken notion that Xmas was a way of crossing out the name of Christ, but for people who were trying to demythologize Christmas, except actually it's a very ancient way of writing the word Christmas in the English language.
But
Goes
luckily
way back,
that's
way
not why
back.
it became popularized.
Well, no, but
And that of course is a major problem. Now I say it's the second most solemn. Can anybody here tell me what the most solemn day in the church calendar is? Easter. Very good. Very good. Anybody know what the third is?
Saint Bibidus.
Not Saint Bibidus. He's just the most often celebrated. No. Pentecost. Those are the 3 great days of the Catholic Church year. Easter, Christmas, Pentecost.
What about the 4th of July, Thanksgiving, and Halloween?
Halloween, maybe. The other 2, I don't know. No, but these days, well, Thanksgiving is almost as holy as we mentioned last time because, of course, we eat turkey then, but which we often tend to do at Christmas. But the Church, in her infinite wisdom, came up with the notion that for her 2 holiest days, there should be periods of preparation beforehand. And these, each of them would symbolize something. Now, Lent, which will be coming sooner than one wants it to, will commemorates the 40 days that our Lord spent in the desert, fasting. Advent, the period in which we're in now, is like Lent in the sense that it's supposed to help you prepare spiritually for Christmas. But it's not like Lent in the sense that there is a joyful element to it. I don't think anybody could say that there's a joyful element to the Lenten liturgy.
No.
No.
No, there isn't.
No, but you see the same stuff liturgically in Advent that you will in Lent. The priest is wearing purple vestments. There's no Gloria. In the good old days before Vatican II, there was no organ. The organ was silenced, except for one Sunday, the 3rd Sunday in Lent called Laetare Sunday. The 3rd Sunday in Advent, rather. Which corresponded to Gaudete Sunday in mid-Lent.
And those are the 2 Sundays of the year where the priest wore rose-colored vestments.
Not pink, as a priest in Ventura said one day.
And not purple as in Lent,
No.
but rose, specifically rose-colored.
Rose.
And not red like on Pentecost.
Old Rose. It's actually called Old Rose. It's a very different thing. And on that day, you've got the Gloria. On that day, you've got the organ. So and of course, in the old days also, you may recall, the usual ending of the Mass was Deo Gratias. I'm sorry, Ite Missa Est Deo Gratias. Well, on penitential days, it's Benedicamus Domino Deo Gratias. So these are little things. So the Advent liturgy is penitential. Now, we no longer, as a rule, practice penances in Advent. The Eastern rites of the church do. They keep Advent like another Lent, as we used to, long ago. In some places, up until recent times, people would still abstain on Wednesdays and Fridays and Saturdays in Lent. I'm sorry, in Advent, just as they used to do in Lent up until shortly after Vatican II. Advent was also a forbidden time for marriages, like Lent. You couldn't get married in Advent. So the whole point here then is that Advent is not really a happy, jolly time. It has an element of it more than Lent does, because we are looking forward to the coming of the Messiah. The symbolism behind Advent is that it commemorates the waiting of the world and the children of Israel for a Messiah, and yet waiting with a certain knowledge that he would come. Maybe not this moment, maybe not tomorrow, but that it would come. And all the many, many centuries, as the song, that wonderful, wonderful song, O come, Emmanuel, says.
Of course, one of the the big trouble with this whole thing we're talking about is that here in the United States especially, and in all Western society that's been influenced by the United States, Advent is a time of shopping and materialism, and leading up to the most materialistic day of the year, Christmas, where the kids get really greedy and grumpy, and if they don't get the things they want, they throw fits and so on.
And they get tired of them.
And especially for those of us that want to be thoroughly Catholic, that is, in the sense of that the saints that we revere were Catholics, we have to do some rethinking. You know, and it's hard to go against the grain when everyone around you is, you know, not only buying in but going hog wild with the whole Christmas thing. And if you try to do anything different, you're seen as antisocial.
One way that you can sort of make some kind of internal peace is that, like, let's say you absolutely have to go to an office party in Advent. You know, very often, if you work in a company and you don't do certain social things, you'll be made to pay for it. Well, one way to do it is to practice a special penance that day, like go without a meal or something, in reparation for having gone to a party during Advent. That's one way to do it. Also bear in mind, of course, that like Lent, the Sundays in Advent don't count. Just thought I'd remind you all of that. But it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing. So let's look, having given all of the bad news, let's look a little bit, shall we, at Catholic practice during Advent. Because, you know, Catholicism is not simply a faith of no. Nothing is given up, but that something doesn't replace it. So, first and foremost, we should bear in mind that there are certain things that one needs to do to prepare for Christmas. In the good old days, virtually every Catholic culture had a tradition of a big meatless feast on Christmas Eve. The Italians are big on it, the Poles are big on it, the Spanish are big on it, the French were big on it, everybody was big on it.
Well, that was because the vigil of every great feast day was a day of fasting.
Fasting and abstinence. And that dinner was the big thing. Now, in Protestant countries, such as in this one, they tend to have a big meal on Christmas Eve. You know, that's what you know, with Bob Cratchit and all that in Christmas Carol. You remember? And the Ghost of Christmas Present shows how everyone's feasting on Christmas Eve. Well, we don't really do that, see. You can have a big meal, but it really should be meatless if you want to do things the way our ancestors did. The time for the big feast itself is on Christmas Day. And to that end, there's certain things, of course, that the homemaker has to do to prepare. Christmas cards, of course, need to go out during Advent. But here we come to another problem. None of those happy holidays and seasons greetings, gang.
Happy Kwanzaa.
Happy Hanukkah.
Happy holidays.
Seasons greetings. Which season? Autumn? Spring?
Sure.
But whatever the case, send out religious Christmas cards. I'm sorry?
Mass card.
Mass cards.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure. Now, if you really want to get daring, send a mass card with the intention for your conversion to your friend Rabbi Goldstein. See what happens. But, no, that's the one thing. The nativity set can be set up during Advent. If you've got kids, it's a good thing to show them, to explain what the characters mean. You can leave the infant out and the three kings, and then make sort of a big deal of putting in the Christ child on Christmas Eve. And then similarly on the Epiphany, when you put in the three kings.
You know, I said this before last time, but it bears repeating that the emotional flow of the approach of Christmas in our culture is this rise in anticipation and in scrambling and swirling around and doing all these pre-Christmas things, which reaches this big peak on Christmas morning, you know, or Christmas Eve, depending when the presents are all torn open, you know, and then there's this depression. There's this, and I know as a kid I used to experience this, you know. There'd be all that anticipation about tearing the presents open on Christmas morning, and then the rest of the day was this utter bore. I mean, you've been preparing for this thing, the Advent calendar and everything, you know, then you find, oh, I got my robot thing, and it's like, oh, okay, it shoots little plastic balls, and that's exciting, and gee, well, I got to think of something else to do. Whereas the Catholic approach to this holiday is to fast in preparation, so that Christmas morning is the first day of a 12-day long feast, where by the time you get to through the 12 days of Christmas, you're ready for vacation.
You're looking forward to Lent. But
it's a way to get rid of all the weight you gain.
that's right, you feel sort of
The
bloated.
12 day. But do you see the difference? You know, I get so tired when people are always talking about Catholic guilt and all this kind of rigmarole, and it's like, no, if you really go back to Catholicism as it was truly practiced, and not like our Protestant friends would like to tell us it was practiced, we find that it made more sense. It made infinitely more sense.
Not really. In the end, the only thing, Catholicism has only one thing going for it, really. Just that it's true.
Oh, that.
Well, you might think that's a big thing. It's not. Not in the minds of many people today. I was reviewing a book actually on the history of Druidism. And, well, you see, this is how one makes money now and then. You see, that's how it's done. And in this book, I was interested to see that one of the authors, these Druid people like to make a big deal about how somehow or other their traditions have survived the terrible Christians and so forth. Well, this woman went on at great length to explain, well, no, that wasn't actually true, and that in fact most of the people they would look to as continuators of their tradition would have called themselves Christians. Well, I looked at it with two different eyes. On the one hand, things have gotten to the point now to where the woman can tell the truth. The whole thing about Wicca, Druidry, and all this, neo-paganism, is an historical crock. It's not true. Never happened. But then on the other hand, it doesn't matter. She doesn't care. She'll call herself a Druidess or whatever. Because you see, we live in a society that doesn't like truth. It doesn't want truth. Truth is painful. Truth hurts. We get upset. We don't like it. So let's all be nice and sweet and loving. Well, as I say, Catholicism has only one thing going for it, that it's true. And that really doesn't mean a lot today. Not much at all. Because we're trained to ignore truths. We're trained to pretend we don't notice. On every level of our lives. It's wonderful. We don't notice. But anyway, one of the things about Advent, though, was that in the good old days when we kept it, like Lent, it was considered to be a time of privation, and so there were saints' days that would come up, that the people celebrated, that provided breaks Now, the first, which didn't always occur, I have to tell you, didn't always occur in Advent, rather, was the Feast of St. Andrew, November 30th. I know it because it's my brother's name day. Oh, I get a calendar too. We can both follow along. This is neat. You don't get to see it. But 30 November is the Feast of St. Andrew. And one of the customs that was very big in certain parts of Europe would be to take a branch of some tree or other that was a bud and keep it over the days of Advent, and then to present it on Christmas Eve to a statue of Our Lady. And it was said that if a maiden did this, and it's an Italian and Polish custom. No, I'm serious. I'm not being funny. It's true. But the legend was that if a maiden did this, and if it had brought forth greenery by the time of Christmas Eve, the lady would be sure to get married in the coming year. So, if it didn't, then the likelihood is she would stay an old maid. But that was, well, at least for the coming year, anyway. Better luck next year. But anyway, so that was St. Andrew's Day. Now, the 2nd of December is a very important feast day for us who live in Los Angeles. It's the Feast of St. Vibiana. You may have heard of her.
The hidden saint.
The hidden saint.
The
That's
stashed
right.
away saint.
The stored saint.
Tell us about it a little bit.
Well, sure. She's the patroness of the archdiocese. She was a Roman martyr. It's really sort of sad. She went through all sorts of tortures and persevered. And it's funny, I've just read her biography and it zipped right out of my mind. Dom Granger has a lovely entry on her. And the only thing I could think of, frankly, the only thing that remains in my mind, you see, she hadn't been sent to Los Angeles when Dom Granger was writing. She was a major martyr. She has a basilica named after her in Rome. See? And for Pius IX to send her here was unheard of.
So we tried to look her up in our saints book. Couldn't find it.
You generally find it spelled with a B.
Or isn't she sometimes called Saint Vivian?
Sometimes St. Vivian, but also
Yeah.
St. Bibiana
Yeah.
is another way you'll find it. But Pius IX preferred to spell it with a V, so that's what we named, the way we named the cathedral and all that. But this was totally unheard of, that the entire body of a saint should be taken from her basilica in Rome and sent to a dump on the frontier like this one. This was amazing. That's why the people of Los Angeles at the time were so proud to name their cathedral St. Bibiana. That's why it meant so much to them. And as I say, the thing that I was reading this yesterday in preparation for tonight, and frankly, one of St. Dom Granger's last lines in his entry blew me out of the water. As I say, she hadn't been sent here when he wrote it. And what it said was, this is why we venerate your remains so reverently today. And I dropped the book. I just started laughing. Gotta laugh or you'll cry, kids. So, I can tell you that for the nonce, you don't have to go to the Basilica of St. Vibiana in Rome. In fact, it's better if you don't, because she's not there. She's right here at our answer to Forest Lawn, Calvary Cemetery, tucked away.
In an unmarked nook.
Yeah. No, it's unmarked. I mean, otherwise people might want to, go there and venerate her or something, whatever Catholics do.
Yes.
So, that's it, Vibiana.
See, you missed a couple of times. Our good friend, the Cardinal, removed her remains from the cathedral and stashed her.
I was reading that the Pope gave it.
O Little Town of Bethlehem was composed by Phillips Brooks, the Episcopal Bishop of Boston. My personal favorite, It Came Upon a Midnight Clear. The Midnight Clear is a Unitarian hymn.
Which means
It means whatever you want it to mean. That's what it means.
it doesn't say anything.
It doesn't say a thing. I love that song because it sounds so Christmassy. But it doesn't go anywhere. I mean, think of the words. It came upon the midnight clear, that glorious song of old, of angels bending near the earth to touch their harps of gold. Peace on the earth, goodwill to men, from heaven's all gracious King. the world in solemn stillness say to hear the angels sing. Okay, I mean, maybe it's the Nativity, maybe it's the Boston Flea Market. Who could tell? It could be anything. It's great. One size fits all, kind of like our country. And that, get to hold this thought, a couple of other ethnic things here. Our mince pies, our pumpkin pies, our turkey, and so on at Christmas, that's Southern. Our culinary stuff, except for certain ethnic things that you may do in your home, are basic.
Turkey's not New England?
Not for Christmas.
Oh, right. Okay.
See, they had turkeys in the South too, and they didn't have Thanksgiving in the South for years. I think until after the Civil War. After the Civil War, they got Thanksgiving, and New England got Christmas. So everything's wonderful. But there were a lot of things like that, And then, of course, Santa Claus originally was Dutch, St. Nicholas, and then he's Dutch and Coca-Cola, which is very nice. Well, it's very polyglot. But Christmas, if ever there was a Catholic feast that literally cries out the old religion, and by the old religion I mean Catholicism, the pre-Reformation religion, it's the Feast of Christmas. It answers something very deep in us, and so the effort of the Puritans to kill it could not succeed. So what have we done? Generation by generation, it's been trivialized. It's been turned into simply goodwill. I love this thing in It Came Upon the Midnight Clear, which is taken from the King James Bible. Peace on the earth, goodwill to men. No, that's not what it really is. It's peace on earth to men of goodwill. Totally different. I mean, the other you get is just, love to everybody. Well, which again is wonderful because the Puritan, always feels a great deal of guilt. With good reason. He has a lot to feel guilty about. It's like dear old H.P. Lovecraft, the famous horror writer, put it. The Puritan, in attempting to live up to the dictates of an inhuman moral code, soon became adept at hiding things. With time, he lost all sense of taste with regard to what he hid. A lot of inbreeding going on in them thar hills. I know, I've seen it. Well, Christmas, then, could be taken as long as it was non-specific. And this is a process that has been going on steadily, certainly since the First World War.
And also the way we celebrate Christmas is all backwards. We've talked about this before, that in Europe the way Christmas was celebrated was that it was preceded by Advent,
Right.
which was a time of penance. All right, 4 weeks of penance leading up to the day of Christmas, which began a 12-day celebration. Now, the way we do it in this country is we do it in a very Protestant way, which is we lead up to it by celebrating and celebrating and celebrating and anticipating, and so when the morning comes, it's over, and everyone gets depressed.
But we'll sing the 12 days of Christmas without knowing what they mean.
Right, but the whole idea of extending Christmas for 12 days gave you something to look forward to, and, with your stomach as well as your heart, all the way through December. But already the Christmas decorations are going up now. All right, already people are starting to eat candied apples. I was in the market today, and they've got stacks of pumpkin pies up to here. Eggnog is out, and people are drinking this stuff and slurping this stuff, and they're Christmasizing themselves now. And then when Christmas comes, that's when the suicide rate skyrockets because there's no fulfillment. I would much rather look forward to a 12-day party. Than a morning of, presents are open. Now what?
And that's what we have. I saw a commercial on TV today. It's the holidays. No, it's not. It's not even Thanksgiving. And I tell you,
Maybe they meant Halloween.
I know I did. No, I can remember when Thanksgiving didn't start for the secular world until Thanksgiving. When I was a little boy in Hollywood, how many of my stories start out this way? Well, the Santa Claus Lane Parade was the, I think the Saturday night after Thanksgiving. And Santa Claus would arrive on a sleigh. And that was the start of the Christmas season. And after that, not before, you could go and sit on Santa's lap at the Broadway. It was after Thanksgiving, when I was an even littler boy in New York, when all the big displays would go up in the major department stores. Now I'll have you know, only one still does that in Manhattan, Lord and Taylor. The others are either out of business or, you know, Hanukkah bushes or something. Well, and that allows me to segue into another point, and that is the de-Christmasization of Christmas. We still have it as a winter festival. But what's happened? Firstly, it used to be, even in Protestant America, from the Civil War to the beginning of World War II, I think one could say safely. Before World War II, you had the fake Santa. And mind you, I have nothing against Santa Claus. The way my father explained it to me, he was a wise man. When I realized that Santa, whom we called Père Noël, Father Christmas, didn't really come and drop off the gifts. I was about 23, something like that. You can imagine how shocked I was. But you know what it was? I caught Dad coming down this chimney. You know, when you're in your late 60s, you're just not that quick. But and after the bottle of gin, you know, it was all over. No, but seriously, he said to me, well, you know the Père Noël is St. Nicholas. And this was something that they always, I mean, I always knew that Père Noël was St. Nicholas. Always. Well, he's a saint. You know, we pray for his intercession. And he hears your prayers, like any other saint, but he particularly loves children. And, oh, I can't reproduce it for you now, but he gave me a long talk. And by the time I was done with him, by the time he finished talking at me, I was happier than before it started. You know? And it wasn't any, yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. Dad was very emphatic about that. So don't be mistaken. I love the notion of Santa Claus. I love the looks in kids' faces. They look up the chimney. My brother used to play with the fireplace and make it look, you know, he'd put footprints. He'd take boots and go, and I go, oh, well, look, they'd all be like,
This is
wow.
when you were 22.
Yeah, this was when I was 22. Yeah, that's right. You can imagine how
You
shocking.
found the dirty boots when you were 23 and your world crumbled.
No, it took me a year to figure it out. I put two and two together. Then I caught Dad putting in the gifts, you know, and the boot, and I thought, wow, you mean Mother used the boots. But anyway, it was all very upsetting. Still,
I mean, your mother would never.
never mind. Anyway, World War II came along, and after World War II, there began the steady de-Christianization of Christmas. It was already pretty commercialized. I think that's fair to say, brother? You're the only one here who remembers the...
Miracle on 34th Street?
Yeah, Miracle on 34th Street. But you know, I'm serious. I think you're the only one here who remembers the pre-war world, so it's fair to refer to you. So then, immediately after the war, the things started getting interfaithed, beyond even Christian. Mrs. Shaba, do you have a copy of Bread of Life here? Thank you. It got really interfaithed. And then Hanukkah began to be proposed as an alternative. And with that came season's greetings and happy holidays and non-religious Christmas carols like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer and Frosty the Snowman and you better watch out, you better not shout, you better not pout. Well, you get the idea. Now, the thing with all of this, and it's so important for you to bear in mind, the thing with it is, it has been a gradual thing that we've gotten used to. Yes, we've gotten very used to this non-Christmas Christmas. And can you imagine what an insult it is to Christ to say happy holidays? And this Kwanzaa thing, now we've got, all right, now how does it work? And I've actually gotten holiday cards from people. I have to say holiday cards, that have wished me at once a Happy Hanukkah, a Merry Christmas, it's sort of out of the way there, a good Yule for our, neo-pagan friends, and a Happy Kwanzaa. All this stuff at once. Well, I'm not Jewish, I'm not pagan. My ethnic background has been a matter of some speculation, but Kwanzaa isn't a real black holiday anyway. Certainly they've never heard of it in Africa. Now, I don't know, frankly, with all of this, what is in people's minds when they celebrate Christmas now. It's this sort of interfaith period of goodwill where we all feel good. Now, in truth, pulling aside for a minute, there's no doubt that it's a different time of the year. There's no doubt that the graces are still poured out on us all at Christmas time. But you see, we are in a society that hates God and hates the truth. And so it does everything it can to dissipate the normal human reaction to this dumping of grace, which is to look up and say, gee, where'd that come from? And maybe perhaps someone would begin to find the truth. No, we'll dissipate it with Kwanzaa and Hanukkah and Yule. I would like to quote something that's apropos from the infamous and never sufficiently to be denounced Father Leonard Feeney. Now, this is his book, Bread of Life, which, for those of you who are interested in the never sufficiently to be denounced individuals thing on No Salvation Outside the Church, do read it. But his first chapter is called Christmas and Salvation. And there's a little something I'd like to read to you. Now, and mind you, he is saying this in the year of our Lord, 1949. This was before Happy Holidays and Season's Greetings. It was before Kwanzaa. It was before Yule. It was before Gay Pride Day. It was, long ago. So this was in 1949 when they were still doing, Coca-Cola was still doing Santa Claus. They don't do him anymore. Our ancient traditions are being taken from us. Anyway, here he is. In 1949. I do not know what Christmas in the United States is going to be like from now on. I frankly do not. I have seen how it has deteriorated in the past 25 years. I know the deceivers and haters of Jesus and Mary across the street at Harvard College will go through this Christmas religiously as fraudulently as they went through the last one. There will be red lights blinking on Christmas trees this year, same as last year. Light revealing nothing. Light meant to be the means of making things visible with nothing to show. Undoubtedly, somebody like Theodore Spencer of Harvard, who called Jesus a myth before he died, will get up and read Dickens's Christmas Carol. That is supposed to be very Christmassy. Some noted actor, if he is able, will do a little Christmas barking on the radio. Some notorious comedian will roar like Santa Claus. That is the culture that goes with Christmas now. And because I, once a son in the Society of Jesus, see it as sad and tragic, and say it is sad and tragic, I am resented. People do not want to see. They would much prefer to hear about an invisible Christmas and an invisible church that we could have in common with those who deny or despise Christ's divinity and his birth at Christmas from the womb of a little Jewish girl, Mary of Nazareth. When the angel said to the shepherds, go over to Bethlehem, they did not mean go over and commune with nature. They did not mean turn to Bethlehem the way a wild Mohammedan would turn to Mecca. They did not say close your eyes and imagine what profound depths there are in you. He didn't. The angel said, run like men and find the baby and his little mother with him. Now it's far worse. 2 years ago, I had a revelation. I was sitting on the in the car, and I turned on the radio. It was Christmas Eve day, and on one of these things, I think KCRW in Santa Monica, one of these public broadcasting things, had a roundtable discussion about the real meaning of Christmas. I like roundtable discussions, and I like real meaning, and I like Christmas, so I thought this was great. I'm sitting there, and who are the people? Well, let's see. There was a former Methodist minister who now is a feminist activist and doesn't believe in divinity at all, of any kind. It was a rabbi. You're laughing. There was some sort of medical ethicist person from somewhere or other. There was an atheist. And there was, to represent the Christian side, there was a Unitarian minister. Well, I felt disenfranchised, left out. So I'm listening to this, and the result they came with, you know what they finally decided Christmas really meant? The eruption of the miraculous into the mundane. That's the real meaning of Christmas, and I
thought that was the definition of a martini.
Did you all catch that? He said it was he thought it was the definition of a martini. Oh, see that I was the same way. I was at the radio. Could you say that again? No, what they said was that the real meaning of Christmas was the eruption of the miraculous into the mundane, and how this was a meaning that we could all get together. So you see, it's gone beyond the sort of interfaith pan-Christian thing that Father Feeney was all upset about, and has gone into this religion of feelings in common, which isn't even a religion. Well, that, ladies and gentlemen, that too is a gift of the Puritans. They could not kill Christmas, so they distorted it. And I can't tell you, really, what a frightening and blasphemous thing it is. Christmas, accept no substitutes. Christmas is the feast of the Incarnation, the source of all our joy, the source of all inspiration in art and music, all of which are important to the degree that they reflect a bit of the beauty that is God Himself. We are in a society that is not simply sick, but is what it has always been. The difference is that the majority of us Catholics simply accept it and go along with it today, whereas once upon a time, on some level, even if not consciously, we didn't.
Gee, well, now is this the point where I bring in the salvation depends on these things issue, or?
Oh gosh. Okay. Sure.
Because last time when we were talking about evolution, and then I said, well, gee, there's this thing about maybe our souls depend on us believing certain things, and you said, oh, there you go, doing that again.
He does this. I mean, he's one of these people. All right, so you're going to be dead longer than you're going to be alive. What's your point?
Well, if I'm going to spend more time dead than alive, I ought to, be thinking about it, planning for it.
Why?
Well, see, most people in this country think I'm going to be retiring for the shortest period of my life since my, babyhood. And
so I want to spend it
I'm
in a hot
do
place.
all this planning, 50 years of planning for that.
Yeah.
But
for
it's
10 years at Arizona, so I can look like a lizard by the time I die.
Right. Whereas you've got this whole eternity waiting for you that you might want to be planning for. At least I want to.
Well, see.
And I keep bringing things into that realm. That what does this have to do with my salvation?
Well, see, here you've touched on an important point too. Another gift for the Puritans. Then you can talk about salvation if you want. It's just this. The Puritans taught that the elect could do nothing about their salvation, they'd simply have it. What Puritanism became is what we like to call universalism. Everybody's saved. And that is really what we all believe. What Catholics believe is that you're saved unless you become Hitler. That's our difference,
Of course, now when we covered the syllabus of errors,
Oh,
we showed that this isn't so.
it's not Catholic, but that doesn't mean it isn't American.
Right? And when we covered evolution, this came up, and when we covered, it keeps coming up.
Does that mean salvation has something to do with our religion?
Well, yeah.
Oh,
And I brought this along because some of you may be familiar with St. Peter Julian Eimard.
Blessed Sacrament.
Right. If any of you practice devotions to the Blessed Sacrament, it's probably in some way connected to the practices that he codified. All right, and Catholic Treasures sells a 7 or 8 volume set of his books, those little red ones in there, that are very good things, pocket size, you can carry around. But this is what he had to say. People often say it is better to be a good Protestant than a bad Catholic. That is not true. That would mean that one could be saved without the true faith. No, a bad Catholic remains a child of the family, although a prodigal. And however great a sinner he may be, he still has a right to mercy. Through his faith, a bad Catholic is nearer to God than a Protestant, for he is a member of the household, whereas the heretic is not. And how hard it is to make him become one. You're stealing my steam. But the point is, this whole decatholicization of Christmas and the season and everything else gets wrapped up in, well, we're all Christians. This is a Christian country and we're all Christians. And the fact is, we're not. You know, as you used a good analogy some time back, if I'm going to turn the tables on you though. It's like, here's Mr. Charles Coulombe, who presents his philosophy and all kinds of writing and articles and so on, so we have an idea what he has to say. And I come along and I say, yes, I'm a Coulombe...
Colombian.
A Colombian, yes. and I'm the best Colombian.
Funny, you don't look Armenian, but
Yeah.
never mind.
And so then you ask me, well, do you agree with his view on Puritans? No, I think Puritans are great. Do you believe in everything he had to say about evolution the other time? No, he's all wrong about that. Do you like the way he dresses? No. Yeah, can't stand the way he dresses. Matter of fact, I can't stand him. Yeah. And then you might ask, well then, how do you call yourself a Colombian? Oh, sure, that's what I am. That's what I am. The same thing goes on when Protestants say they're Christians. Okay? They deny the majority of what Christ said. They do not do the majority of the things he ordered us to do.
But they're Christian.
But they're Christians. Now, how we reconcile that?
Well, we reconcile it by saying we're as Christian as they are, which I'm afraid is probably true. But there's the problems again, ladies and gentlemen, come back to one key point, and that is, really, in the end, they are not the problem. Not this much. They are what they are. They are obeying what they have made themselves. We are the problem. I'm the problem. You're the problem. We're the problem. Because we just go blithely along, la da 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 da. We're simply, incredibly, totally wrong. Thanksgiving will come along,
And we'll buy into it.
which, as I've said, as we've said, celebrate Thanksgiving, but do so intelligently. Do so as a Catholic. What is this faith? Mass and communion. Give thanks for your faith and the ability to spread it. But remember that gift puts a terrible obligation on you. I mean terrible in the old sense. Having it, you must spread it. Faith without works is dead. That's from the Epistle of St. James, which Luther called the Epistle of Straw. That's a great way. I believe in the Bible alone, and if I don't like what's in the Bible, I take it out. Great. I wish I could do that. The third thing, by all means, have the turkey. Oh, heaven's sake, celebrate. We get little enough reason to. But don't buy into the whole Puritan thing. And I would recommend as strongly as I can that you run to the library or the bookstore and get Hawthorne's Maypole of Marymount. Use it as
sit
your...
around the fire
That's right.
and read it out loud.
Oh, the vision of my childhood. My parents, my brother and I, smiling sweetly, and everyone else going,
And then as Christmas approaches, there's nothing wrong with reading Dickens' Christmas Carol. I mean, it's a very interesting story, and it does have a moral to it and so on. But how often do we sit and read St. Luke's Gospel in the same light? You know, or the visions of St. Bridget, or the writings of St. Mary Agreda on the Incarnation.
venerable.
Venerable, excuse me, venerable.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, she's blessed.
Blessed. But anyway, you get the point. I mean, why not read some of that as well?
Some religious Christmas card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, above all,
that's his
that's
big
my
thing.
big bugaboo. Religious Christmas cards. I don't ever. But, and mind you, a religious Christmas card doesn't mean a congregational church in the snow. That's a religion.
Unless it's burning.
Season's greetings. Oh,
I
heretics
didn't
roasting on an
I
open
didn't say
fire.
that.
Inquisition sniffing at your nose.
We've got to kind of.
Oh yes, we got to kind of wrap it up. All right.
Plugs